Okay, we'll start on the next presentation here, and it's with my honor that I'm privileged to introduce Aaron Leidick. Aaron wrote a bit of an intro for us here, and I know I'm not going to get all the pronunciation right, but I'll do the best I can. He grew up in rural Nebraska on the ancestral lands of, and I'm going to say, Omaha and other peoples of the Great Plains. He was a facilitator, worker, and community organizer. He was thankful to many mentors and is committed to increasing healing, liberation, and joy through collaborative community efforts at all levels, local to international. He focuses on amplifying our collective work for transformative anti-racist practice, immigrant rights, disability justice, queer trans empowerment, gender equity, and youth leadership. Since early 2012, Aaron has been living in Kitsap County on ancestral lands of Suquamish, Port Gamble, Skaalum, and other coastal Salish peoples, where he organized with Kitsap showing up for racial justice, Kitsap advocating for immigrant rights and equality, and Kitsap Equity, Race, and Community Engagement Coalition, which is sometimes known as Kitsap Erase Coalition. Aaron, it's great to have you with us. We communicate by email and at least video, we meet by video now. I'm happy to have you with us. Thank you for coming.
Thanks, David. It's great to see you, and not just in an email inbox. Hey, everybody. I'm Aaron, and I'll just clarify so folks know you're seeing me on two devices. Here's me on the video and audio, and then there's another me on here that's called Kitsap Erase Coalition Slides, and we have a slideshow we're going to share from that device today. And I also want to say hi to my friend Debbie, who David didn't have an intro for Debbie because at the time that we were asked and I sent that in, I didn't know Debbie was going to be able to join me yet. But Debbie, you just want to say a few words to say hi and introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Debbie Haase, and I've been over here on Bainbridge Island on the lands of the Suquamish peoples, for almost 25 years. And I've been involved with the Kitsap Erase Coalition for about a year now. And I also work with restorative justice circles and facilitating compassionate listening, merged with undoing our conditioning, our racial conditioning. So I'm here just alongside Aaron, who is a mentor and a teacher of mine, watching him in action all the time.
Before we get into our slideshows, I want to mention a little other thing that Debbie and I have going on. If anybody is interested, you can hit us up at the end here. Each month we facilitate a peacemaking or restorative circle called Speaking Truth Together. That is specifically for white folks who are already personally dedicated to anti-racism work to come together and do deeper connection and healing and learning about that work. It's not a task group. It's really a relationship building and internal work group. So if that's something that speaks to you, hit us up and we'll give you the information. But now, as they say, on with the show. We have a slideshow, and how we're going to kind of do this today, this session, is we wanted it to be experiential. So we're going to talk to you about what Kitsap Erase Coalition is doing. But the way we're going to do it is as if you're coming to a Kitsap Erase Coalition meeting, because we've been, of course, having those on Zoom. And a big part of the way we come together in meetings is having some small group time to do that deeper relationship building that we need in order to really meaningfully pursue race equity work. So I'm going to share a slideshow now. We're going to kind of take you through it. It's going to feel like half presentation and half like you already became part of our coalition. So never fear, that's how it's supposed to feel. All right. Here we go. And at the end, by the way, we have a time chunk for sort of more interactive big group conversation with Q&A. So that will be part of today. So here is a reminder of the coalition that we're talking about. It's Kitsap Erase Coalition, and that stands for Kitsap Equity, Race, and Community Engagement Coalition. We thought our friend Deanna Jimmer might be joining us today as well, but I think she wasn't able to make it. So Debbie, I will cover her piece, and there's our names up there, so you can see how those are written. When we come together for our meetings of Kitsap Erase Coalition, which the coalition's been around for about 15, 16 months in this form. So most of that, of course, has been meeting on Zoom. And when you go into a regular room space and you're showing up for a community meeting, there might be posters on the wall that talk about the group or what it's been up to. We wanted to create that sense of mingling time when you just come in and you're checking things out. We wanted to create that in the Zoom space. So what we do when folks come into the room, so to speak, in Zoom, is we have a couple slides at the beginning of the meeting that you can just kind of read and take in and absorb as you are settling into the space. So if you're new to Kitsap Erase Coalition, like most of you are, this is what you'd be doing at this point in the meeting. You get to read a little bit about what Kitsap Erase Coalition is so that you come into the active part of the meeting having some of that knowledge already. So we get real interactive, and I'm going to just call out, would anyone like to unmute yourself and read what you see on the screen here? Read this poster about what Kitsap Erase Coalition is.
I could go ahead and read it.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Kitsap Equity, Race, and Community Engagement Coalition is part of a local legacy of people-powered change, of years of Black, Indigenous, people of color, and allies engaging neighbors in the hard work, the heart work, the collective work of building beloved community. Kitsap Erase Coalition is a collaboration of many groups and individuals boosting interconnected race equity work, rooted in relationships, collaboration, and commitment to racial justice. Kitsap Erase Coalition organized for thriving community and profound, accountable, and liberatory institutional change.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks for speaking out there. Not always easy at the beginning of a presentation. So we'd share that. That'd be on the wall, so to speak, at the beginning of the meeting. And then we would also have this other slide, which we won't read this one out loud. It's a little bit longer. It talks a little bit about how the coalition was convened by Karen Akuye Vargas, that we meet a couple times monthly, that we're really focused on base building this year, and about the different working teams within the coalition that do various things between the coalition meetings to move our priorities for race equity and community engagement forward. So we'll talk about all that more today in the meeting / presentation. But now at this point, when folks had all come into the meeting and we were really ready to get started, here's how we begin. We gather on lands where Coast Salish peoples have long resiliently resisted the ongoing harms of colonialism. Let us continually ask how we are respecting the tribe's sovereignties, rights to self-determination, and sacred connections to this place. In solidarity, we work with intention toward truth-telling reconciliation. Please center yourself in this context and in the following words from the Port Gamble, S'Klallam, and Suquamish tribes. And then today we'll just have these words up for you to see in the presentation. And at this point, any coalition member usually, would take a turn, and if they wanted to speak aloud the words from Port Gamble S'Klallam tribe or Suquamish tribe to share in the space, or sometimes instead we sit quietly and think on those for ourselves. Sometimes we might give an update about a particular ask or something coming from one of the tribes out to community. And then for folks who are, maybe you personally are not on S'Klallam or Suquamish tribal land, we have a website you can see up there. It's native-land.ca. It's not our website, it is a website, where you can look up what native lands you're on, wherever you are, or where you have been or lived in your life. I'll put that in the chat a little bit later too, so folks can reference it if they want to.
And so next in our gatherings of the coalition, somebody does just a brief share, a cultural share that helps, ground us in that race equity work and brings forth traditions that that are going to kind of help undo the white supremacy culture that we all live in. And today I won't be doing, this is, this kind of really sets the tone for the meeting. And we've had just some lovely presentations of people's personal lives, places they've come from, and how that and what's being affected in those cultures. Today, rather than sharing, since I pretty much come from a white dominant culture, I'm not going to share that, but thinking about culture a little differently. Last week in one of the little team meetings, we talked about what is culture. And oftentimes we think about culture as the customs, the arts, the social institutions, the achievements of people and nations. But I feel called right now with you in this gathering to talk about culture more in the context of the way of being in a group, maybe the norms of the group. And the reason I just want to share this with you is because being part of Kitsap Erase Coalition is transformative for me in the culture, in the way of being that the group meets and practices. I've worked in groups and facilitating groups for many, many years, but I've not experienced this way of being where a group is truly, truly collaborative. And in the way that the group we meet and relate is actually doing the work while we're doing the work, in a way, walking the talk, being collaborative, being really transparent. There's not even a rotating facilitation. There's that's shared and changes every time. There's high importance and priority put on relationship building and connections. And that's why we have the breakout rooms. So we really get to relate and develop relationships. And not just the focus on the tasks and not the focus on all the quantity. Although the amazing thing is with the teams working on their separate meetings, there's so much work that does get done, but without this sense of urgency, without this pressure, but in almost like a joyful way. So for me, this is my personal experience of working in a very different cultural way within an organization and upholding and uplifting all the voices of color and the people of color, really walking that talk. And that's not exactly how we normally set the tone. Culture sets the tone, but for me, that sets the tone in a way also, or in a big way. So, Aaron, do you have anything to add?
That was beautifully done, Debbie. I think I'm going to reflect one more addition that I'll reflect, and that's of our convener, who's Karen Akuye Vargas. And Akuye has been doing race equity work in Kitsap and beyond for over 30 years in a very community engagement focused way. And I want to just tell the story of how we began doing Culture Sets the Tone. And that was that we were coming in for a Kitsap Erase Coalition meeting. We have that 10 minutes at the beginning where we're casually hanging out and chit-chatting while we make sure folks have time to arrive. And somebody shared something that was helping them, sustaining them in the work of striving for race equity. That was a cultural tradition that was helping keep them focused, helping them remember their connection to ancestors in the face of so much white supremacy culture. And they said, oh, I'm sorry, I'm taking up so much time. I know we need to get started. And Akuye said, no, this is why we're here. And this is what we need to remember to keep us focused in this work. We can't do the work in ways that replicate the systems we're trying to change. And then people are like, cool, let's do this every meeting. And then that's how it happened. And so now we open that at the beginning. And there's been some really beautiful times when folks have both gotten to bring forth and share their culture, get to know each other better. And it teaches us lessons of, wow, I didn't realize that, this particular aspect of mainstream culture was such a reflection of white supremacy. And what this person is sharing of their ancestral traditions helps me to see and understand and counter those things that are in my everyday life. So Akuye really brought that forth for us. And then we said, great, let's make it part of the meeting. And lots of times folks who come to the meeting say, this doesn't really feel like a meeting. And we're like, great, that's probably as it should be. So, all right, so we're gonna go on to our next piece. And this is when we really get into the more interactive part for folks. So before we get into it, I'm just going to show you a little overview. We'll come back to this later. Here's what we do when we come together as a full coalition. This is what these meetings are like. We do it twice a month. And like Debbie said, there's the teams happening at other times. And at this point in our meeting, we talked about the land on which we gather. We offered our deep cultural share. We take a look at our agenda. Does it look good? And then we go into our small group work, which you see there as our own individual connection to the work and finding our collective cadence. And that's really when we have folks in more intimate spaces of small groups so that we can talk about who we are, get to know others. And we really try to find balance with this. Let's each bring our own individual journeys in this work and those that have been in our community, those journeys to this work. And what is our collective cadence, right? We're a coalition. So what is, if you think about this like a big band that you're in, right? That's sort of with cadence, like we're all playing our own instrument of organizing for race equity, but we want to make a song together that is moving forward and engaging our community. And so that's what this part is about, the small groups. So we have some small groups for you today. And what we're going to do is there's 3 rounds to the small groups. You're going to be with just 3 or so other people, so groups of like 3 or 4 people. Every time you go to a small group, you'll be with the same people, and we're going to do 3 rounds. So we'll send you out right now with this first round, and then it'll be brief. It'll be about 7 or 8 minutes out there in the group. We'll bring you back, and then we'll send you with the second round prompt. That'll be a little longer, about 12 minutes or so. We'll bring you back, and then we'll send you with a third prompt, and that'll be even a little longer, about 16 minutes or so. So you have some time to kind of build upon each layer. And after we go through all 3 rounds, then we'll have time for a little bit of reflection in the full group. So go ahead and I'm going to ask somebody who's not me if they'll read the prompt aloud, the prompt for this first small group time. Lisa's off the hook because Lisa already volunteered once.
I will. I'm Jean. Are you called to race equity work? If so, what calls you?
Thanks, Jean. Appreciate that. And I'm going to stop the screen share right now. Oh, I want to say for folks who aren't familiar, all the pictures you're going to see here, they're by the same artist, and the artist's name is Micah Bazant. And I'll put Micah's website in the chat as well, so in case you want to learn more about their art. So, but before we send you away, I'm going to put that prompt in the chat as well. So because the chat goes with you when you go to your small groups, and that way, if you want to reference it, you can. And what we usually say in Kids Up for Race Coalition is this first round, is also a good time to share your name or just like how you want to be called by the folks in your small group. And we encourage people to, the way that you introduce yourself, I might say, my name is Aaron, and by way of introducing myself, I am called to race equity work, and here's what calls me. So instead of going to your small group and saying, oh, I'm Aaron, and here's my job, and blah, 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 we don't do it that way. We tell who we are in response to the prompt. So we're going to encourage you all to do that and help to get it a little bit deeper in the conversation. Okay, so here comes your first round prompt into the chat, and I will send you off to small groups now. I'll send you a little broadcast message when your time's almost up to tell you you're about to come back. Okay, here you go, everybody. Okay. Make sure everybody can get, Brian or Mary, are you having troubles getting to your small group? If you can hear me. Brian is assigned to a small group, maybe went away from their device. Let me know if you need technical assistance, Brian. All
Are
right.
you timing it, Aaron?
Yeah, I am. My clock says that I sent them at 11, so we'll bring them back sometime around 11:08. David and Tom, are you want to stay in the main room? Did you want to be in a small group? I think you're muted.
Oh, yeah. So we can, we'll go into room 7 or room 8 here.
You can just pick, yeah, since you're the actual host,
Yeah.
you can go wherever you want.
Yeah. Okay. Joining 8.
And I'm close to Seattle and Oregon because I originally came from Oregon as far as FOR is concerned.
You got all the bases covered here.
Right.
You. So I'm Tom Ewell, live on Whidbey Island. I formed a separate Whidbey Island FOR
Okay.
a number of years ago. It's not very active right now. I'm doing other things and didn't do well at passing on leadership. So but it's there. It's got a little treasury, and I'm ready to go when the moment is right. My race equity work is primarily around criminal justice reform. That's been much of my life career. I directed the Maine Council of Churches for 20 some years with a focus on criminal justice. The criminal justice system is heavily skewed racially with a disproportionate number of African Americans. Just worked very hard on a bill that gives people with felony convictions now released can vote. The basis for preventing felons from voting has racist heritage back to the Reconstruction. So that's the way I work the racial equity work.
I'm David Lambert. I live in Faircrest, just outside Tacoma, and I'm part of the Tacoma FOR. And I also do it. Well, I need to be as good as I can in terms of in terms of equity, justice, equity, and racial justice work as far as my work, because I work as a social worker, clinical social worker. And it's imperative that I do the best I can to treat everybody just and do active listening. And I know that's impossible in the sense that I'm part of the dominant society. I'm immersed in it. And at the same time, I I think it's imperative to keep trying to be as good as I can to be equitable. And I think he also said about what brings us to justice work, or why do I do justice work? I have to in a sense of so I can understand people better and get to know. Because I'm very curious. Always for many decades been very curious what it's like to be a person of color. And obviously, I never know that. And at the same time, the more I communicate with people, diverse backgrounds, the closer I can come to, without being able to do that completely, be able to appreciate that and have more empathy and understanding.
Mm. Yeah, thank you. We popped in a little late. Vivi, did you have a chance to share
I did.
being called to race equity work and what calls you or anything?
Mhm.
How about
You had-
you,
You went, oh,
Debbie? Are you just,
I did and Tom did. And then David.
okay. Yeah. Well, I think what calls me, quite honestly, what really at the I don't know, 5 years ago, at the beginning of that last election, and I saw all of the escalation of hate crimes and policies. My heart was just like broken and open. And I'm like, it is about time, I'm in my 50s and I need to wake up and start paying attention to racism and white supremacy and my privilege and working at unpacking all that. So I think what actually brought me to it was heartbreak and an acknowledgement of how ignorant I was around any of this, because I hadn't paid, and how much privilege I have to be able to not pay attention for 55 years. And so, and now I see all the people suffering, ones in my own community as well as around the country and the world. And I can't unsee what I've seen because I value fairness and equity so much, So that's where I'm at. That's what calls me.
the word I use a lot these days is reckoning. It's a good word for where we
Reckoning,
are.
yeah.
Almost every page I turn, there's a reckoning to be had. Right back to reckoning with the idealism that we're all having inalienable rights, etc. We need to reckon to that. What does that mean?
Reckoning. Yeah, that's a word I don't use very often. It really is really resonating with me.
Yeah.
Thanks.
A good one.
Mm-hmm.
Timely.
Yeah.
So it's like an uncovering what was previously,
Yes.
it's hard to understand, but previously not observable is currently in raw, open
Yeah.
wound in a way.
Yeah. And a wound that's been there for so long, right?
Yeah, I just reading something recently, and I heard this maybe a month or two ago in a video, but it was talking about the world history book I'm reading. It's dense, and I don't get very far in it. But one part of it got in the late 1600s and up in the 17 something.
That
It's Union Seminary in New York.
it's beautiful. All right, welcome back, folks.
But you don't need an appointment to get into Union Seminary Library? I mean,
I'm not going to answer the question.
Well, the point is, I just finally had to take notes from the ATLA religion database. I had to go to LA. I also went to LA last weekend to see I'm just waiting for the GTU library to reopen finally. Is that, you actually physically there, or is that just a photo?
I think that's just a photo and a background there, Brian. And we're going to go ahead and dive back in because everybody's back now. So thanks for that first round, everybody. And I'm putting into the chat for you that information that we shared at the beginning about what Kitsap Erase Coalition is, including the website where you can search what Native or Indigenous land you're on. So just letting folks know that's now in the chat in case you want to see that. And then we're going to move on to your second round, getting to be in your small groups. And again, you're going to get to be with the same folks. So here, let me pull up that second slide. And remember, you are going to get a chance to debrief your small groups a little bit when we're done with all 3 rounds. So here's our second round. Would someone like to unmute and read the prompt for the second round?
I could.
Great.
I'm Vivi, and it says, how does your spiritual tradition support race equity? How does this get in the way?
Great. Thank you for volunteering to read that. And I put that into the chat as well, so you have it as a reference. And you'll have a little bit longer in this round. So I gave you about 8 minutes the first round. You're going to have about 12 minutes in this next round to talk about how does your spiritual tradition support race equity and how does it get in the way? So I will send you back out to your breakout rooms. David and Tom, you're gonna, if you want to go to one, are you just gonna pick and go? You don't have to, but they have a smaller number in room 8 if you are looking for one that's lower.
I think my spiritual background taught me that that we're all, to me, it's like we're all in this together, and we're all able to, we're all worthwhile, and I don't know. But as I grew up and in the Lutheran Church, I don't see much diversity. I don't see much. So it's kind of like getting in the way. We're always talking about it, but we're not practicing.
Thank you for your honesty.
Well, I can go next. My spiritual background was Unitarian Universalist when I was very small, and then I moved to a little larger place. It was still a small town. It didn't have a Unitarian church, and so I went to the Methodist church. So Unitarian Universalist, but also I appreciate what Richard Deitch said when we were doing research. And he said that he believed in basically the Sermon on the Mount. He didn't say that, but basically everybody's equal and should be treated equal. And I have a similar basis, spiritual or philosophical basis. And at the same time, I'm like, Vivi, I don't remember when I was a kid, the Unitarian Universalist or Methodist Church, no people of color in either one. That I was somewhat. It's not like I was sensitive to that. It was sort of like that was. I didn't really think about that, so it just shows me how overwhelming we can attach ourselves to a culture and dominant culture, which conflicts with, in some ways, in some ways conflicts with our value system, my value system. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
My Quaker tradition is a solid basis for a long tradition of equality. So I not only try to live that out personally, but I've got a tradition that supports me, encourages me, even holds me accountable. I don't want to go too far away from that if I'm going to be accountable to my own community. That having said that, it puts a pretty high standard, a high bar for me to live up to, and for the Quakers to live up to. We have a checkered history of racism and slavery, even. Amazing as that would seem to be in a contradiction of our so-called value of equality. The basis for that is our belief that there's that of God in each person. So if there's, and all of creation actually, there's a sacredness, a deep honoring of the sacred in all creation. And it's really hard to have that feeling and get too far into the weeds of resentments and even hatreds of judgmentalism. But we're all susceptible to it, as certainly I am. And I appreciate the fact that I have a tradition that reminds me constantly in our, what we call our spices, our simplicity, peace, equality, community, and stewardship. That it keeps reminding me over and over again all the time of my commitments to the sacredness of life, basically. I liked Albert Schweitzer as a kid. It was a big deal for me to break from my Methodist church and go to Albert Schweitzer, whose reverence for life was his cornerstone. But my minister and others reminded me that he wasn't always the best Christian, that he, although he was serving others, he didn't buy the whole Christian thing. But the reverence for life part, I did just reverence, and it's been part of me ever since.
For me, I grew up Catholic, probably until I was about 30. And, I think I broke from that because of the hierarchy and realization of how many people were colonized and missionized. And right now, I have a number of spiritual practices, like Buddhist meditation and the interconnectedness with all of nature and all of life, and with kind of a unity of people, but consciousness, and shamanic traditions. And so it's supportive in that the sense of unity, interconnectedness, the sacredness of all life. And it gets in the way because I can think about, the unity, we're all one, We're all the same. I used to think that now I don't, but, and become colorblind in the process of thinking that we're all the same and all one. But now the thing that's getting in the way for me personally is all of the traditions I've been steeped in the last 25 years are not like my own tradition. You know, they've come from another culture, and I am struggling with what is cultural appropriation. And it's like everything I do is cultural appropriation. You know, everything that I embodied, it's not from my culture. And because my only culture was Catholicism, and I don't relate to that. I don't know. So that's, again, I'm like, you can hear me spin probably. It gets in the way because I'm not sure how to reckon with that, the reckoning. Yeah.
Yeah, a number of years ago, I directed the main council of churches. And so here I was, supposedly a spokesperson, a leader in the religious community, assumed to be primarily Christian, although we had Unitarians and I was always working interfaith. But one day I was writing something, and it was the end of the day, and I lazily thought I should put something biblical in there. And I threw in the great commandment, love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and misquoted it. And my Baptist cohort, my staff person, came in and said, you know, you Quakers really shouldn't try to quote the Bible. Well, we laughed about it. And then it went right to my soul. I said, you know, do I have anything that I really do believe if I can't even quote am I really? And I really seriously thought about quitting just on the basis of hypocrisy and lack of integrity about it. And then one morning I woke up and I said, I need my own, to answer your question a little bit, Debbie, I need my own faith. I need my own cornerstone of what my theology, what I hang my soul on. And I won't go into detail, but it's a long story, but it's basically the mystical part, which is my Jewish take. That you don't name this great presence. It's mystic. It's a mystery. The interconnectedness of all creation, which is the heart of where I believe most deeply, and the redemptive power of love and the restorative power of truth. And I live on those as my reference to God, and that's mine. And it's a little bit of it each, I guess, but I'm not dependent on my Gandhian belief in the truth, seeking the truth necessarily. All that's part of it. Sorry to go on a little bit.
Thank you, Tom. I would love to get your email if possible, if you're willing to talk to me again some more about this, because anyhow. If
I
you
do
feel,
a blog. I'll put you on my blog. I think how do I get your address, or how do I get
I'll
your
send it to you in a little private thingy or a
TUL at whidbey.com is my web or my email. Last name is EWELL at whidbey.com.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd love to talk with you further.
Well, thank you all. It looks like we have 15 seconds left. I
I
think
think take up too much of the time. I really am. I didn't mean to do that.
No worries, Tom. It's all appreciated.
we might have a third round. I don't know if we have time. So we'll see. Maybe we'll see.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. After your round 2, and now we're going to go to our third and final round. So I'll go here to the next slide, and who would like to read this one aloud for us?
Can do that.
Thank you.
what does healing look like to you?
Thank you so much. And we took this specifically from the title of your spring assembly this year, which is Healing Destructive Divisions, Respecting Differences, Finding Common Ground. So what does healing look like for you? Again, that's in the chat. I'm going to send you out and you'll have about 16 minutes this time. This is your final round in your small groups. Okay.
Hello again. A small question this time, huh? I can't hear you, David. David, I can't hear you.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now?
And I was muted too. I was saying healing and reconciliation are very similar. Is there a relationship to the two of them? Our fellowship of reconciliation, of course, what are we reconciling and how does that healing? Another way to ask it. And how are we doing it?
Yes, I can take I'm not going to say a stab at it. I'm going to take do my best at it. I think I'll use some words, adjectives or nouns or whatever to, one is mutual acceptance and the importance of active listening, the importance of being kind to self and others, loving to oneself and others. What I mean by that is not a romantic love. I mean respect and integrity. And knowing we're going to be far from perfect. We're doing the best we can to take in what other people are saying. And that also doesn't mean, it also means being respectful. And if somebody's disrespectful to us, it doesn't mean reacting back to them, but being assertive and sharing that, you know, I deserve respect and I think you can do better, kind of thing. I'll stop at that right now. Now, I think I said nonviolence. I'm not sure, but you know.
I'm a strong adherent of restorative justice. And you ask what harm is done, and then you seek to heal by bringing person back into the community by listening to them, hopefully waiting for them to express remorse and willingness to change, to reconcile. And that model is one that I use daily. I think it's, in my lifetime, I think it's the biggest breakthrough in my lifetime, which is the truth and reconciliation concept. If there is a peace, a theory of peacemaking that I would like to be able to claim for my generation with all our faults, this truth and reconciliation, thanks to the South Africans and our tribal ancestors.
I think of healing as when we can listen to each other and respecting each other. So we understand, and then the world is a lot better to me when we all are able to talk and listen and respect each other.
Thank you. Do you feel complete for now, Vivi?
Do I feel complete now?
Yeah. Or do you want to share more
Yeah.
now?
No, I'm complete. Yeah. I'm not completely healed though.
Oh,
Darn. Yeah, it's interesting when I saw this question. Actually, I came up with the question, but I didn't answer it when I came to utilize today. But where I went with it was, what does it look like to me? I was like in the more of the vision, imaginary place, not imaginary, but images. And I went to a place of, I also work with energy. And so like, I just like see this whole world transformed. And that's what healing looks like. Like where really people act from a place of love and respect, like you're talking about, but it's like everywhere, it's like everything is valued, and including the environment. And what does it look like? For me, healing looks more energetic in that, it's kind of like removing the energetic obstacles that we have, clearing our energy field so that we don't have all this gook around us that, and around other people, and cleaning up our thoughts so that our actions can fall in alignment. And so healing, I guess healing for me looks like a complete transformation. So I don't know.
I'd like to follow up a little bit on that, not so much the energy part, but in a sense, but in a different way, the transformation. I like that, really like that. And I was thinking that for me also, in addition to what I have shared already, and I just got in touch with this a couple of months ago, actually, that I think we have the capacity as a species, and it's going to be difficult. It is difficult, but to rather than react, nations, individuals, families, whatever, to react to other, knee-jerk reaction, but we have a prefrontal cortex, and we have the mindfulness and the ability to pause and to respond rather than react. It may take a little while. We may not know exactly how to get there. We have to be vulnerable, like we said earlier. But it can be done. But I also think we need to, some people don't have very many resources right now, socially and everything. We need to get everybody on board, give them adequate material resources so they can respond that way psychologically, neurologically. And that's what healing is to me too, where everybody has their basic needs met, and they can not react but respond, and respond to each other with the inner core, respect the inner core of the personhood of each other, and not get all upset about the reaction. And we're not judges depending on what we say or not. Hold it again, they can disagree with us, but so much of what we do is reaction and judgmentalism, and not respect each other, the core personhood of each other. And that to me is healing, transformation.
That respecting the core or essence or whatever the word people use,
right,
really resonates with me. Thank you.
The act of clearing of that you talked about, Debbie, the tribal indigenous people get that right. They worship the four directions first. That is an acknowledgement of the power of the energy of the world, and try to give that some focus of various kinds of energy, healing and so on. And then there's the energy of the smudging. And for me, that's just claiming that there are misdirections and bad stuff out there to sort of at least acknowledge and move out of the way. And again, the Truth and Reconciliation is a process of clarifying, of clearing out. And truth is, the hard part of truth is that it's a cleansing process, usually, and a hard one.
Yeah.
The truth about ourselves, the truth about our relationships with each other, the truth about our history as a nation. And the other thing the tribes do that are really important is that they clear out the fact that they are not ever alone, that they have this heritage, and they'll name their heritage. They're never alone in that frame. They're clearing out that their ego, that their individualism, which is our disease of our culture, one of the major diseases, there are numbers, but we believe we've gone so far off to the individualism. But to clear the fact that we are never alone, that there's spirit, and then there's ancestry, and then there is our principles that we're accountable to, that we need to reckon with.
That makes so much sense to me, Tom, what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Well, these are ancient things. This is nothing new.
They are.
These are the ancient ones speaking through me a little bit. And it's the hardest thing because, as Debbie said earlier, we are so acculturated into individualism. I want to have my own right to what the COVID world has thrust upon us is I want to be able to mobile. I want to be able to be mobile. I want to be able to go wherever I want. I want to be able to buy anything I want to be able to buy. I want to be able to say what I want to say. I don't feel, and all of a sudden I can't go where I want to go. I can't, I'm constricted, for gosh sakes. My freedom has been, if you watched one of the politicians the other day going after Fauci about his freedom, what are you going to do about my freedom? My freedom, my freedom. You've taken away my freedom. Oh my God.
Yeah,
we're so enculturated in that sense of leave me alone, buddy.
Yeah.
Don't tread on me is the word. Yeah.
And something else you brought up, Tom, for me, for healing is the ancestral piece.
Yeah.
It's like I facilitate something called Systems and Families Constellation as well. And epigenetics, it's like the trauma at whatever level goes on for generations and generations and generations. So the healing, if we can like restore that flow of love through the generations, and like mine with, Holocaust people, great grandfathers who got exterminated in the Holocaust is there, and you could think about the enslaved people and anyhow, I'm just getting worked up, but healing the generational trauma.
Thank you, all of you. We're going to be for the final time. I hope to.
Yeah, the last time.
See you again someday in the virtual world, if not in reality.
Yeah. Nice
Around FOR. Love to you all.
Love to you.
Bye. I didn't used to be able to say that.
Oh, well, there's healing, right?
There's healing.
Wonderful meeting you all.
Good meeting you.
Okay, welcome back, everybody, to the main room. A couple people still filtering back there. So thank you for doing the small group rounds with us. And we're going to take, Debbie will kind of have us call us out, little popcorn style, just about 60 seconds for a couple reflections before we tell you more about the structural components of Kitsap Erase Coalition.
Yes. So just a little time to popcorn, something that you heard that really made you think, or that created a shift in you during your small groups. I think we have time for a few people, and if you just want to unmute yourself and share sort of briefly, so we might have a time for a few people.
I could just say sort of FOR has some unfinished work around racial equity that came out of some conferences a couple of years ago where we tried to deal with that, and it was pretty difficult. And so I just want to say, starting out with with working here is a good space to work with that.
Thank you. Just feel free to unmute yourself and popcorn. What struck you? What stood out for you?
When we started talking about healing and thinking about what that may be, that shifted the focus for me.
Yeah, thanks.
One of the things I shared in my group is that being healed is not usually something we choose, but accept that that energy of life in us that some of us call the spirit is always pushing us towards experiences and events that will heal us if we engage them openly.
Yeah, thanks.
So this is the part that, we won't do this other part that we do at our meetings today, but usually now too is when folks who are brand new to Kitsap Erase Coalition, we'd invite them to introduce themselves to the full group if they wanted, after they've had that time, right, in a more intimate setting. So maybe they feel a little more grounded and ready to connect. And that's part of the way we sort of have our culture and our community there, as well as letting folks make some connection before they're kind of in the spotlight, right? So we have a little bit of time left, and what we wanted to do was talk to you about sort of the rest of how our meeting goes. And that means talking a little bit about the structure of Kitsap Erase Coalition. So you'll see that the next thing we would do at this point is hear back from those working teams we mentioned. So we're going to tell you about those. At each Kitsap Erase Coalition meeting, and the coalition meets twice a month, we hear from 3 teams. There's 6 total, so 3 go on the first Friday and 3 go on the third Friday. So I'm going to talk about the ones that are the top section there, and then Debbie's going to speak about the bottom. So we have 4 teams that their work is about pushing for race equity analysis and action in some specific institutional realm. So these teams are bringing together anybody who wants to participate, some people who are very active elsewhere in the coalition, and some just are part of their team. Some of them have expertise in that area. Some of them are just passionate about that area. They come together in a collective, collaborative way on their team to organize and then advocate for race equity and analysis in one of these realms. So there's a team that's pushing on criminal justice institutions, one on governmental jurisdictions, educational institutions, and health systems. And the areas identified there came from an open letter that Kitsap Erase Coalition put out, which was sort of like marching orders for this work in Kitsap. And we put that out last summer and detailed out in these institutional realms work we think needed to be done. And then we followed that up with these organizing teams to push for that. So that's in the institutional realms. And then Debbie will talk about the other teams.
So the other 2 teams don't work so much they don't work in the institutional realms, but more around calling in community, the advocating for community members unlearning what racism and white supremacy. What we do in that team is we've done like a survey of all of the 50 or 60 groups, organizations that are in the coalition to kind of see what resources they have so that we can be a place where we can help people connect, people coming into the coalition with an area they might be interested in, and also an avenue, if you will, for events and actions that are happening that lead towards unlearning racism and white supremacy. Like we have a calendar. Some of you might be super interested in this, that has events in the county, in Kitsap County, related to unlearning racism and white supremacy. And we're just going to we just kind of are a little bit like the connectors in the coalition. And then the Breaking Bread team is a group of spiritual leaders, faith leaders, religious leaders from various areas in the county that get together once a month to pray together, to have some inspiration together, and also talk about how race equity is in their faith traditions, in their communities, spiritual communities. So it's a place where they can all come together with this equity lens as well. And then there's leads of all of these so that we can stay a little organized. And those, I love the name, the TLC, the team leads and the convener, meet once a month so that we can get a sense for what the agenda might look like for the upcoming meetings. And so it's pretty amazing how these teams are working so well, but aren't like rigid. So, yeah.
So we want to have a little time for folks to ask questions. We just have a few minutes left. So I'll just briefly say, at every meeting, we have these three other components, the critical conversations, the scheduled spotlight, and then all about that base building. Just I'll say in 30 seconds what each one is about. Critical conversations is, as organizers, we recognize, even though we plan these agendas in advance, there's always going to be something that comes up that really needs community voice brought to it right away. So we reserve a time block in every agenda when we can, at the top of the meeting, say, is there anything like that for today that we need to bring all our voices together on? And then we do that. Scheduled spotlight is a time when any different group or organization is part of the coalition already or not yet part of it, takes about 10 minutes to tell us who they are and what their work is about and how we can come alongside. And then all about that base building. Base building is a core focus for the coalition in 2021. And so we practice it, we talk about it, what it is, we further develop our knowledge about it in meetings and talk about how we're implementing it in our teams and in all of the different groups and organizations that come together to make the coalition. So, and then we always end our meeting with reminders of what's coming up and announcements. So I'm going to stop the screen share now. I know we just have a couple minutes left before y'all have music session at 11:50, which is great, but we wanted to make sure folks had time if they had any questions they wanted to ask about Kitsap Erase Coalition. And I will put into the chat, of course, the email address again, if you're interested in getting more involved.
This is Joshua. I have a question. I imagine that the members of your coalition have encountered individuals who are opposed to the coalition's agenda. I'm wondering if those experiences of opposition are shared and talked about. And I'm also curious if you encountered any organized opposition to your agenda.
So I'd say one of the things, like Debbie talked about at the beginning, the way we do the work is really important to us, that be in alignment with our end goals. And that means collective and collaborative all the time. So anytime there's any sort of a thing that is like, oh, here's an institutional power that isn't down with race equity or whatever, we bring it back to the group. That's kind of like the mantra, bring it back to the group, bring it back to the group. So yes, anytime there is anything like that, we'll talk about it together as a coalition. And we've found it to be very strategic that if either individuals or institutional representatives try to kind of silo us off, right, to kind of not take into meaningful account the analysis we're bringing, if we come back together collectively and collaboratively as a team, it's harder for them to do that. So that's generally been the method that we've used. And I would say people have felt empowered and connected and supported by that. And yes, we have received, for example, we're pushing for race equity advisory committees at all governmental jurisdiction levels, and that those have community members on them to advise the government. And we have gotten pushback from certain city councils on that. And we just bring more people and we bring more voices into the room and connect more to community around it. And it seems to work well.
Oh, well, an example of inter-ethnic conflict was here in California, the ethnic studies. I mean, the way it went about it was very much so heavy-handed it could backfire. But Jewish and and I read this over when I got finished with 2 books on the problems of Black-Jewish relations. What Went Wrong by Friedman. I don't know who the author is, but the title of the other one is Trouble the Water. But Jews are very sensitive on Israel-Palestine, and many of them see any suggestion that there's anything wrong with the idea of Zionism as inherently anti-Semitic. That
Ryan, I'm going to interrupt you for a second. I'm going to interrupt you for a second because the topic that you've brought up about intergroup conflict is a really useful one to illustrate how we've talked about that through our base building strategies. And so in Kitsap Erase Coalition, one of the things we've done, and an example of this would be how recently with some attacks against Asian and Pacific Islander heritage elders in the Bay Area, there is a tradition in broad institutions of kind of using, whether it's conscious or not, those moments to cause division against marginalized peoples. And one of the things we did in the coalition was we learned from our history. And so as organizers, we look to Black and Brown and Indigenous-led movements and how they have done quality analysis of systems and not fallen into those pitfalls. So for example, we did a lot of conversation about what is the way that Asian American, Pacific Islander, and African American or Black communities have a shared analysis of how the system benefits from that division, but the people don't. So what you bring up is a great point, because we've found that having the deeper base building conversation and those more meaningful connections like we build through the small group has really helped us to not fall into those traps, right? And to center the leadership of people who are striving for the well-being of all. So somebody asked in the chat, are there race coalitions in other counties in Washington? I'll just briefly respond, and I know our time is up. So I want to say that we are connected with folks across Washington who are doing race equity work. The particular name, Kitsap Erase Coalition, came out the mouth of Karen Akuye Vargas. So it was created here in Kitsap. It's not, that name isn't sort of necessarily being used elsewhere, but there's definitely folks collaborating collectively for race equity across the state.
So real quick question, can people come visit your group and kind of
yeah, definitely. Just that email address that I put in the chat. That email address that I've put in the chat, if you want to find out more about Kitsap Race Coalition or come to a meeting, just email that email address and let us know your interest and we'll get you hooked up.